back to another special episode of the Epic Experiment Podcast. I'm Bruce, it's episode 154, and I'm joined on the line once again by Sneaky Pete to chat all things Magic the Gathering. How are you tonight, Pete?
Hey, it's good to be back. We had a little bit of a break. We had to get some food poisoning out of our system, so we're good and healthy now. I don't know what Bruce and I ate, but we both were experiencing some stuff, so we're good to be back.
Considering we're like literally 1,000 kilometers apart,
yeah, it's impossible pretty much to say. But anyway, not to get any details for the audience, but we were under the weather last week, so we decided to have a little bit of a break. A little structured break, as they say.
Audience, it was graphic. There was like Technicolor, there was yawning, and there was
bleep.
It's a family show. It's a family show
now, right? We're gonna have to just cut all that. All right. well, so like anything else, cut it. So like everything else, we're every show we like to say thank you so much for being with us. Our content is on the Lotus Council website. thelotuscouncil.com, and it's on various Discord servers. Bruce, how do you get a hold of us?
Well, of course, the best ways to reach us are all in the show notes. You can check down below for how to reach out to us. We'd love to have the audience participate with us. Send us an email, reach out to us on the Discord, send a Twitter.
Smoke signals, obelisk, abacus, anything really.
Carrier pigeons,
yes,
whatever you got.
Just an old mast boat.
Audience, I got a secret for you. Don't tell Pete. I'm not cutting any of that. Okay. Anyway,
come on.
Okay. All right. So up first, we got some garbage or great. So up first tonight, Pete, we got this card here. We got Gold Forged Thopterix. So a white and a blue for a Dinosaur Thopter. Thopter, artifact creature. It's a 1/3 with flying and lifelink. Each legendary permanent you control has Ward 2. What do we think about this card?
So, it is the only card of its kind. I tried to look that up real quick as you were giving us the rundown. It is the only Dinosaur Thopter in Magic as of now. So hopefully we see more of those in the future flying around. But Ward is a cheeky mechanic, right? Because most people, when they read that, they're like, it's like worse than hexproof. But because of the fact that you have to pay 2, you have to consider that every single time you target it. And if you're playing lots of cards that have legendary on it, like I played in my now Thou Shalt Not Be Named Rafine deck. It's all legendary cards, of course, like the horrible standard deck right now that's just been wrecking everyone. But I think just giving it self-protection is good enough, right? It's a 1/3, it has evasion. If you put some boots on it or something, like Embercleave or something, it'll be cool to just beat somebody in the face with it. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. I like it as a card, Bruce. It's a cool tiny leader, but it's also just a cool card.
Well, it can't be a tiny leader because it's not a legend, but it is a very cool card. And I agree with you. I think it's well worth the inclusion in most lists. The reality being that more and more, with all the legends that are being printed, like I don't know how many there are in Legends, Lost Caverns of Ixalan, but there were a lot of legends in Wilds of Eldraine. And when you have that many legends being printed all the time, there's more and more incentive to put legendary creatures in your decks. And I don't know about you, but I find myself putting more and more legendary things in my decks, and now they have a little bit of protection. And it doesn't cost me much to slide this in my deck, protect some of my more important pieces, and then reap the benefits of having my things stay on the board a little bit longer. So I'm a big fan of Gold Force Thopterix. At the price point of 12 cents or whatever it's listed here as being, like that seems like a really budget friendly way to be a little bit of protection. I mean, comparably, you have Shalai, right? So Shalai is another one that plays a similar role in terms of trying to provide protection. And Shalai is, well, you can get her for as little as $1, I suppose. But most copies are $5 or more. So if you're going for a budget, if you're a budgetary conscious player, the Ward 2 for your legendary things is a lot different than having everything having hexproof. I agree. But the alternative is you can't spend the $5 on the Shalai, but you can play the Thopterix and give yourself a little bit of protection. I think it's worth your while.
Yeah, and then just like permanents that are most common that we see that are legendary lands that are really really impactful, right?
True.
Legendary artifacts. Most people are playing things like Bolas' Citadel, or legendary enchantments. So there, it's subtle, right? It's very subtle in the
Yeah.
way that you have to deal with the card because it gives itself that. So anything that grants itself protection always sort of seems to be a winner in my book.
Hmm.
Again, doesn't fit every single deck. I've always been having trouble, like the last few months, figuring out what to do with it. So then when I was like, I'll just build this deck, cheat a little bit with the legendary stuff. It fits in there pretty nicely. So yeah, again, I think it's worth its weight. So it blocks well too. So that's nice.
Yeah, it's, a 1/3 flyer is something to be respected. It absolutely is. So yeah, decent. I think it's a decent little inclusion if you're
Easy
playing
enough.
blue white X. So something
Mhm.
good to have. All right,
Sure.
what do we got next?
We have a card from Throne of Eldraine called Tome of Legends. So fits right in with Orthopter as a joke. But um, so Tome of Legends says pay 2. It's a 2 mana rock, sort of. It enters with a page counter on it. Whenever your commander ETBs or attacks, put a page counter on it. You can pay 1, tap it, remove a page counter from it, and draw a card. Bruce, what do you think about this utility
I lo-
artifact?
so I like this. I mean, I wish it were a mana rock, but that can be fixed easily enough.
Hmm.
Um, so the fact, okay, whenever your commander attacks or enters the battlefield, so lots of commanders, as we've discovered, have this propensity to die. Just how it goes. And when things die regularly, you want to play them again because your commander is cool. Probably linchpinning your deck. You're going to get the ability to put some extra counters on it. If you can proliferate extra counters onto it, you're laughing. If you can find a way to there's lots of ways to get this to work. And then you just have a simple little way to draw some cards. Even better if you can get it to tap and untap. I think you're going to accrue some good value out of this to help keep your hand stocked. It's not going to. It's a sort of innocuous piece that's going to sit on the battlefield, accrue a little
Yep.
bit of value, and then when you need it, you're going to be able to draw 2, 3, 4 cards, and I think it's going to be really quite beneficial to your game plan. And it gets even better if you play partners or if you play
Oof.
other stuff, partner with things that are going to lead you to getting more value out of this sort of card. I think this is actually pretty decent little inclusion. Like I said, I wish it were a mana rock, but that can be fixed. Things like I don't know, Lord High Artificer Urza. That guy turns all your
Mhm.
artifacts into mana rocks. That guy,
Galazeth, the dragon, the
yeah,
is it
that too.
dragon? You know.
Yeah, so you can do
Mhm.
that too. And so I think there's a lot of applicability here. And again, the price tag's appealing. Toma Legends is like $2, 230 right now. So
Mhm.
pretty affordable. You can pick them up instead of buying your morning coffee tomorrow morning at Starbucks. You go and pick up this for your deck. And next time you play, you're going to have a cool little draw engine for your deck. That's my thought.
Yeah, at the rate, I mean, Maze Mind Tome, right? The one that just got reprinted in Ixalan. You know what
Treasure
I mean?
Map?
Treasure Map. Yeah,
No.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So like these.
Sunset Pyramid's another one that's from
Hmm.
Amonkhet. Does
Yep.
something similar.
So it's
Now,
like the rate of 2 mana, right? You're spending 2 mana, but it has a late game applicability. And most people are not going to use an abrade on this card or some sort of
no.
artifact kill spell, right? Like it's not even worth, even if you only get to activate it once in a game, that's good enough. Because it's only 1 mana to activate it. So
Yeah.
in terms of its rate, it's just not like I'm not going to put it in every single deck that I play, but I'll definitely put it on decks where like my commanders kill on sight. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like I think this would also be really cool if you get something like a Voltaic Servant or something that like untaps artifacts.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. One
Unwinding
unwinding
Clock.
clock.
Like you can do some really
Yeah.
good things. Getting
Seedborn
this
Muse.
tapped and untap. Yeah. The Seaborn Muse untap artifacts or
All
is this
permanents.
oh there we go. So
Every
yeah, so
turn
you're
you could potentially
yeah.
do
And
something with it.
because this is contingent on you getting your commander into play and attacking, if you
Or
are an
flickering your
attack
commander.
I guess we're flickering. True enough. If you got a way to do some of those things, then you're going to be able to put a bunch of counters on it and use
Mhm.
that as a way to get your keep your hand full, and progress your board state. So I'm a big fan. I actually think this card is pretty neat little card. And people have forgotten about it. I know initially when it came out, there was a lot of people who were big into playing it in Historic Brawl,
Sure.
and never really migrated to paper particularly. But I think people probably should go back and revisit it.
For sure. Again, it was one of those times where we were getting right into Commander as more of the mainstay format in Magic the Gathering sort of quota. So, this was one of the first times we saw where they printed cards in a main set that had Commander applicability. So it was interesting. It was an interesting time back then. Wow. Okay. And we're not even that old in the Magic
No,
world.
but
So.
I mean, that was 2019. That's coming up on 5 years. That's coming up on 5 years.
Crazy,
ago now,
right?
Which
Crazy.
is like 2024 is like not that far away, and like we're looking at like a 5-year window there where like this card has been forgotten about because there's been so many other things that have been printed.
Yep. So let's talk about another warping card, a format warping card, Subtlety. That's the one that you wanted to discuss.
Yeah. So
or are we gonna go?
Let's do Subtlety. Like okay, audience. I'm going to be full disclosure here. So I spent my weekend playing. We called it our annual Cube weekend, where we went away and we played my brother's Vintage Cube. And in the Vintage Cube are all 5 of the Modern Horizons pitch elementals. So Grief, Fury, Solitude, Subtlety, and Endurance. And over the course of the weekend, we had a lot of discussions around whether we thought these cards were any good in the cube. And we all unanimously came to the conclusion that, yeah, they were all good. And they were all really powerful, and they earned their spots in the cube unequivocally. Which got me thinking, like, how do these talk to translate into playing Commander? Because when you're playing Cube, you're playing 1v1. It's a limited card. Or a limited circumstance. In Commander, we have a much broader card pool. You have 3 other opponents. Does it make sense to play a card that is dedicated to you being able to pitch resources in order to play it for free to whatever advantage? Now, obviously, like if you're playing competitive EDH, yeah, they all have applicability because you don't have to spend mana to use them, which is hugely advantageous because in an average CEDH game, you're playing in a very condensed time frame. Lots of decisions to make, a lot of resources to invest in things. But does this still hold true for casual Commander? And I wanted to use the example of Subtlety because, like, everyone can understand like why Grief and Fury can be good. Solitude, like, if you can play Grief and flicker Grief and you can like ruin someone's day, or Solitude is a Swords to Plowshare on a creature, right. Fury burninates the table. But Subtlety is one of these ones, like, does Subtlety warrant a spot? And because it interacts with a creature like almost like a bounce spell and makes them put it on top of their library or on the bottom if they would. And my question is, like, really, should this card see play in Commander, or is it better off being left for competitive 60 card formats?
Yeah. So as a guy who's played both the white and the red elemental pretty consistently in games, I can say that they're both fantastic. Especially in my mono red deck where I don't have a lot of choices for creature removal, like direct damage, and then copying it and sacrificing it is great. I mean, so red is good, white, great. Obviously, I'm flickering it. You'll see that later in my deck list in a few weeks when we discuss that. Subtlety and the endurance card are tricky, I think, because of how niche they are, right? Like, the interactions are niche. So, like, endurance, you're not going to really play that much because of the fact that either your deck doesn't really, like, it's not going to be impacted if you put all your cards from your graveyard on the bottom, when you'd rather play a card that recurs specific permanents or cards from your graveyard to your hand in green. Or you're not really going to play every single game against someone who plays graveyard decks. It's good to tuck some things too. And that's what people do with this mostly, is they mess with the particular archetypes in Modern. So I think it's tricky, but I think they're doable, right? Like Reach, a 3/4 Reach is actually a very good blocker. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
For 3, it's really good.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. The rate on endurance is sort of the appealing part there. There's
Subtlety,
no
though,
doubt about it.
if we go to that, though, it's tricky because people have messes up in tournaments before where they play it thinking that they're gonna interact with something when the spell's countered already, so it doesn't tuck anything when it enters because it never resolved. I saw this on YouTube. This guy was highlighting like the worst match ever played in competitive 660 card, but like I think if people, because some people think it's like you counter a spell with it, like you tuck the spell, but you're tucking something that's already on the field, right? So it's almost like if the creature resolves, is it even worth playing 5 mana to tuck it when they can recast it again the next turn?
Yeah.
So that's the tricky part with this is like for the price tag and for what it does, unless you're able to make them shuffle their or like shuffle their deck, it feels sort of almost bad to play it, unless the card is so broken and you're going to win that turn. I don't see it being that impactful in a pod. Like if I tuck your Planeswalker, like your Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, for example, and then you just draw it again, unless I can interact, like say I mill you a card, that would be great, right? You play Subtlety, you make each opponent mill a card or two, and it's gone. That's good. But
Yeah.
I guess it's tricky, right? In the
Yeah.
interaction that it has.
Yeah, the timing on Subtlety makes it more difficult to use than some of the other ones, where like Fury and Solitude are removal spells. Grief attacks the hand. Endurance is the one that has graveyard applications, and Subtlety is weird because it's going to essentially target a creature or a planeswalker coming down on the stack. And so yeah, it really begs the question: is it worth playing? And I sort of come.
Though. The thing has to resolve first. Right, so it can't attack the stack, it attacks what's after that, once it goes around the table.
No.
Yes.
Well, spell is put into its owner's library, doesn't resolve, isn't countered. So I'm reading in the rules around Subtlety's triggered ability targets a spell on the stack. It can't target creatures or planeswalkers on the battlefield. So the creature would never resolve.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So like it's on the stack, but people have used it in the reverse sense. Like they've targeted it with something's already on the field.
Yeah. They're using it like a.
I wasn't clarifying my point.
They can't use it like an unsummon. It's not unsummon.
Yeah, it's not a bounce spell.
It's Venser. It's using like Venser, Shaper, Savant.
Mm-hmm.
That sort of ability. And so it is far more niche. I think the card is combination of the difficulty around playing it, the fact that lots of players in casual Commander are like it's great. It's going to protect you from a creature combo. So somebody's going to come down and like try and Kiki Jiki the table. Now you got a way to fight Kiki Jiki on the stack, but you could have done that with a counter spell. And so I don't know. Like I'm very much on the fence for this one.
Yeah.
So like I don't know. I definitely am like I think my position here, Pete, is I'm going to try it. I have a copy of Subtlety. I'm going to try it in the deck, and because I think there's
against me
based on the power level of the other four, there is something to be said for this sort of ability. And the fact you can use it for free and then potentially reanimate it later in the game or buy it back and like regrowth it or something. You could do something really interesting with Subtlety, and I think it's worth the conversation. I don't think there's any doubt there, audience, that the other four are all very applicable in Commander. They all have very useful abilities that come down. And the only issue we run into really is that they're very expensive. We try to be very budget conscious for you here on the show. Well, when copies of Fury and Grief and whatever else are pushing $35 to $50, it's hard for us to look you in the face and say, well, audience, we're being a budget-friendly podcast because we have $50 cards on the No, that's very expensive. So Subtlety is the one that's the cheapest of the five. It's at $15 for a non-foil pack version. You can get a fancier version for 25 to 30, which, considering that some people play some expensive gizmos, like they play a Great Henge, some people play like a One Ring, they play some of these, if that's where your price point is for your deck, then maybe adding a subtlety isn't outrageous for your price point. But it sure adds up quick if you start playing too many of those pieces kicking around. So anyway, I think my conclusion here, Pete, I'm going to try it. I'm going to find a deck or two where I want to try it and see what a subtlety looks like, and if I have applicability when I play. Because I may find that it's no good, and it's really hard to sit here in theory craft. I know it's in 7,500 decks on each rec. That doesn't tell me that's a lot.
Doesn't tell us much, though. Really
doesn't tell us much. Like if the card deserves to be there, or if people are just playing it because they have a $25 card in their trade binder and they're like, "Wow, I should play this," and they slide it in a deck. So
I guess just real quick, the applicability point before we move on. It could fudge someone's commander, right? Because they have to choose now to put it on top or put it back in the zone. And if there is a chance that you're able to mess with that library of theirs, then it would be really, really good. Like the top of it.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, like if they choose to put it back on top and then you make them shuffle their library, would they have the choice of replacement effect to put it? They must have they must have a replacement
because of the new rules, right? I think because of the new rules, they like if your commander changes zones, you can do that. Yeah. But I would look that up for sure because that's actually really good. So there are a few cards out there that say target player shuffles their library.
So that's Soldier of Fortune. Soldier of Fortune.
Yep.
That is an oldie but a goodie, and you can force somebody to shuffle their library, and Wizards hates it. But you can do it. So we'd have to go looking into that one if that could actually a thing that could happen. Because if you can subtlety their commander and they put it on top of their library, and then you Soldier of Fortune them, does it go?
Real quick, cool. Here's a list of cards that you can do it because there's a bunch. There's Blessed Respite, which is target player shuffles their library or their graveyard into their library, prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn. There's a goblin that you pay 1 red and sacrifice it. Target player shuffles his or her library.
Yeah.
There's some green. Like sorceries and stuff. But anyway, learn from the past would be really funny because you just pay it for 4.
You could time twist, like follow up with a time twister or like time spiral or something like that. Like the only reason I'm thinking about this audience is like I spent my weekend playing with you. This was the card pool I played with. Like Time Twister was a thing I could draw and play in my deck, and so anyway. But yeah, cool stuff. Also, Cube. If you have friends who like folks, proxy the Cube. Please. Don't have to be real cards. Proxy it. Try it with your friends.
It is amazing.
So much fun.
We are big advocates of Cube here on this podcast. We love Cube. Bruce made me fall in love with it recently, so it is so much fun.
I think we might have done 10 drafts on the weekend. We made 10 Cube drafts, one after another.
That's terrific.
And I have zero regrets about it. We Cube drafted all weekend. Like we arrived Friday night, and like within half an hour of everyone arriving and getting everything into the rooms, or into our the bedrooms, like everyone's back at the table. Like let's do this, and we went hard for the whole weekend. Nice. So anyway, cool stuff. Well, all right, but. Are we moving on? Or are we going to do one more card?
Yeah. Let's save the next pick for another day. I think because of our discussion today is more nuanced with like overall sort of complexity. Because our decks today are very complex compared to the last few that we've done. Granted, the decks we featured last week for the graveyard or 2 weeks ago, they can be very complicated depending on the interaction that occurs. But these ones are just complicated right off the bat, right? You got to know what the heck you're doing with these.
Yeah. So, yeah.
What do you got for us today, Bruce? We're talking more of like a storm sort of dirtle sort of situation, right?
Yeah, so this is like so I have Alaundo the Seer. So Alaundo, if you haven't seen him before, is from Adventures of the Forgotten Realms, Baldur's Gate. And he's 2 green-blue for a 3/5 human shaman. And here's the text on Alaundo. Tap, draw a card, then exile a card from your hand and put a number of time counters on it equal to its mana value. It gains when the last time counter is removed from this card. If it's exiled, you may cast it without paying its mana cost. If you cast a creature spelled this way, it gains haste until end of turn. Then remove a time counter from each other card you own in exile. So it plays into like suspend, but not suspend because it doesn't actually have suspend written anywhere on it. So anything that you cast with you tap with Alaundo and exile, you put counters on it, and you only remove the counters when Alaundo untaps, right? Like when it only taps and untaps. It's not like a suspend where each turn it progresses, and even whether Alundo's on the field or not, the suspend counters will come off. So the deck, I saw the deck on as a historic brawl list, and I said that's kind of cool. I want to build this, and so I built it in paper for Commander, and I've played it, a handful of times, probably a half dozen times. And what I discovered very quickly with this list is that you really need to be paying attention with this one because it's tricky. You're going to miss stuff. And there's a lot of really weird cards in your pool, like in your deck, that you're not normally going to see. So yeah, Alaundo is super interesting. It's sort of like a quasi suspend sort of style card, and can cast a lot of really powerful things for free, allowing you to spend your mana on other things like holding up mana for protection and counter spells and other such things. So that is what I have. Pete, what sort of deck did you dig up tonight? It's going to make us dirtle our faces off.
So I'm going to sigh a little bit because it's not that exciting, but it's Anello the Painter. So it's basically a spell slinging deck. It's more Storm though because you copy a bunch of spells, you get to do a bunch of things. But it's basically an extra turns deck with some 2-card combos. Ew. And then, there's like some really neat cards in there too, like instants and sorceries that I just like to play. Like I like Fork. I have a copy of it. I love it. It's just a cool card. So I don't know.
I had a Fork. I sold it for $50.
It's about 30 now, so it did drop into a reasonable. I mean, if you could call that reasonable for what it does, but I don't know. It's this deck I could probably build for like $100 and it would still be good. It's more so the fact that I have like the some of the more expensive cards for instants and sorceries and extra turns, whatever. It's just a deck
like
that came
like
out
the
of
expropriate here.
Yeah, it just came out of like, okay, I looked into my binder over the years and I was like, I have a lot of these sort of builds, like card builds, so I'll just put it together. But that's the deck. I don't play it very often. When I do, people are like, oh, come on.
Yeah.
Because it is a pain in the ass to deal with, for sure. But
yeah, so looking at this audience, like he runs 13 creatures. You got some repeatable sack fodder and tenacious underdog and tall run, so you can feed Anello. And then listen to the sorceries, folks. You're playing an Alrund's Epiphany. Okay, extra turn. Oh, you have the Chain of Smog in here. Do you have what's the trigger on that? Do you have the
there's two. Basically there's Professor Onyx, which wins you the
Onyx,
game,
right?
and Ral Storm Conduit does it too. So
right.
there's
Okay.
two redundancy. But anyway, before we get into the meat and the bones of the deck, basically we want to disclaim that like any sort of complicated deck like this, you want to know how to pilot it. You want to almost practice that. Like you should look at your deck like 20 to 25 times before you really like know how to play it, right? That's any deck, really. Especially in Commander where there's so many interactions that could be there. I've been guilty of this where I played a deck and I don't actually know what the heck it does. And I sit there for 10 minutes doing a line of play that I've never done before, but it doesn't actually do anything. In this particular list, that's happened several times where it's like, I'm going to take 3 extra turns. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to take 3 extra turns and see what the heck happens. So that's not exactly the best way to go about it if you want to keep your friends playing Magic. Alaundo's the same deal. I've personally seen Bruce draw like 25 cards but not know what to do, like not what he can do with the deck to like win the game. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
difficult. It can be hard. I mean, what do you have to say? I mean, I've only seen this deck maybe 5 times, so it's not like I've seen it every single time we played together.
yeah. So this is one I bring out pretty rarely because what it does is it leads itself to being pretty predictable. So let's get into so one of the guiding questions is like, what are the drawbacks of this deck, right? So the
Right.
drawback to this deck, like the idea being, if you want to play as many ways to tap and untap Alaundo as you can, but your deck is hinging on Alaundo. If Alaundo isn't in play doing what Alaundo things, your game strategy falls apart.
Right.
So, which is really disappointing. So I've played it before, and my opponents, and Pete was one of them that day, had seen Alaundo go before, and like, oh my goodness, okay, so we need to kill that. Obviously, that thing needs to die as frequently as we can get there. And once that happens, the deck sort of falls apart because anything that's in exile doesn't lose the time counters unless Alaundo is actively tapping and untapping. So in that way, it's much inferior to suspend, where a suspend card would at
You're
least have the
guaranteed to
card.
cast a spell at the end of it,
Exactly.
where you could
Exactly.
have 6 time counters on a 6 mana card. He gets killed with a, you know, with like a standard like Dismember or something, and then those cards are gone forever, right? Like you literally can't get them back because Alundo's a
Yeah.
new object. So that
Yeah.
sucks too, right?
I believe once you have Alaundo back online, you can then go back to removing counters, but you need to have because the cards don't care which Alaundo
Interesting.
cast them, but they do care that it is a Alaundo tapping and untapping.
So the strength is personally like if you're able to keep them in there, you can chain a lot of spells quickly.
Yes,
right?
you can.
Where like my deck, it's like it's like very quick if I can, chain a bunch of spells. But there are times where, I mean, Anello sits there. I have nothing to sacrifice, so I can't copy any spells, right? I have no token producer, so I can't do it. Or I can't. There's no point in me copying a brainstorm twice because it doesn't do anything for me. I guess.
Yeah.
So it's like the way the deck runs. Yours is like more interesting, I guess, too.
Well, it's a little more involved. And so like I have played it before with one pod I was playing that particular day. And I'm going to be honest, we live in Canada. The cannabis is legal in this country, and so we have the friends I was playing with that night had, let's say, indulged in a little bit of the cannabis, and so both the other two guys commented that we're glad you're the one trying to pilot this deck and not us because we can't think clearly through all the lines of play that you're trying to go through. So yeah, now the version I was playing was not quite the version I'm going to show with you tonight because the one I had before lacked a couple of win cons. But pretty much every card in the deck is dedicated to tapping or untapping Alaundo. So like things like Bounding Krasis, I got a couple of Kioras who are objectively pretty poor commanders or planeswalkers, but both of them say untap a permanent. Yes, please. You got Breaching Hippocamp, Corridor Monitor, Galvanic Alchemist. You can tap on and tap things. Kelpie Guide.
So
what else?
With the critical mass, right, would be you need one of those untappers, and you need Alaundo out and not dead, right? You need to be able to untap them like what 2 or 3 times a turn, or what would you say?
So I've managed to get him up to 6 times in a single turn.
That's pretty good.
It's pretty good. I got to be able to get him to untap and untap 6 times, which means I then proceeded to vomit a whole bunch of spells into play. The trick with him though is you cannot, because can't necessarily sink all your eggs in one basket. You don't want to go put exile something like a Hornet Queen and have to try and get to 7 cycles of untapping him because you may not get there. So you end up having to like put secondary threats into exile. So something like what example? Techova, Steward of Tides. 3 mana, does a thing, and when it comes into play, like 3 times you could do that. All right, because you're then going to have to spend real mana on getting some of your scarier things into play. But if you can cast enough spells, the idea being you overwhelm your opponents in turn and drown them in card advantage, you're going to be able to secure a win eventually. That is the logic. And when I have played it, I have been threatening to move towards a win without having a good combo to nail it tight shut. I just end up having to resort to just raw value and massing of material with which to beat you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess my deck is like a very traditional combo deck, right? Where you're trying to draw a bunch of cards, discard. You either play Mizzix Mastery and play all the instants and sorceries and win the game that way, or there's the Chain of Smog combo, and then there's an extra turn combo with God Eternal Kefnet and Scroll Rack. If you put Temporal Mastery on top, you just keep going. Not very exciting. And then there's the Jace, Wielder of Mysteries, draw your deck and win by that. So I need Anello out on the field normally and some way to make a token or something expendable I can sacrifice to copy some spells to draw cards. Like the one card that I really like that's not expensive for mana cost and for price, it actually came in the precon of this deck because originally this was a precon. It's Drawn from Dreams, which is a reprint. Look at the top 7. So if I copy it, I look at the top 14. I get to put 4 cards into my hand, which is basically like a really good tutor. Or like Seagate Restoration, copying that twice is a really nice way to like draw into the win condition quickly. Yeah. So it's more so like I need to be able to cantrip in some way. I don't. You notice in the deck I have a lot of instants that say like draw 2, discard 2, because I don't care what's put in my graveyard, as long as I'm able to cast something that will get me further along. I've noticed that I just need some simple tricks. Like Into the Villain's Lair is not a great card, but it's good enough for what I'm trying to do, and I can copy it or whatever, or Soren's Ransom as well. So stuff like that. But yeah. So just I guess the critical mass would be like a few cards that are valuable, like maybe one cantrip, a way to copy it, and Anello. Would be like an idea. But again, it's depending on what's in my hand and how much mana I have available. It will depend on really how the deck will perform. There are times where I have no cards in hand and it just doesn't feel great. And there are times where I have like 8 cards in hand and I don't know what to do. Because I'm not really the best Storm player, to be honest, Bruce, in regards to
fair enough
to it. So
can I jump in here and sort of say, so when one of the things a couple of things that I've added to this deck since I last played it was the fact that there's a number of cards in this deck that make you pick up lands to untap things. So Quirion Ranger, and then there's a Scrib Ranger. Are both ways that have you pick up lands, and also by virtue of drawing so many cards, you're going to end up with lots of lands in your hand. So I ended up going for an Oracle of Moldiah and an Azusa in the list to try and empty my hand of extra lands and put them back into play. Because if I am having to cast lots of spells and cast the bigger high end spells, with the actual mana, and then using Alaundo to put other more interactive pieces on the board, you need mana on the battlefield. So those cards have been really key. But then, so you have a couple of alternate win routes or alternate plan Bs if you need them. So you have a Yisan the Wandering Bard, which or Wanderer is an option that operates in a similar space to Alaundo, in that it taps and untaps and tutors up creatures out of your deck. And then the other one is a Psychosis Crawler that, just by virtue of drawing so many cards, you're going to end up potentially dealing a lot of damage to your opponents. Those are ways that you can use this particular commander to great effect to help you power out and try and secure the win. The other route to victory that gets often overlooked is Tachova, Steward of Tides. It just makes flyers. I don't know if anybody noticed it makes flyers, and you can attack. You can make if you can get enough times of with the Oracle and things playing extra lands, you can make a bunch of flyers, and that will be a way to close out the game. Flying creatures can often do it. So if you get, and it doesn't take long. By the time you have 3 of them in the air, you're dealing 9 damage to somebody, likely, because they probably are ill-equipped to deal with an armada. So, like, that's the plan B to what I'm looking to do there, folks. And things that are new additions because before then I was lacking in a way to secure a victory. I was having to try and manufacture a win out of raw material, where I could instead be looking to Psychosis crawler the table out through drawing additional cards, through Teferi's Ageless Insight or Thought Reflection or Staff of Domination or whatnot. So anyway, that's some adjustments I made to the deck to try and give it a better option in the late game if my primary win con of just beating you to death isn't working.
Cool. I actually started adding more like shuffle lands, like fetch lands, and then ways to like shuffle my deck, because I noticed that if I'm stuck and I keep like drawing lands instead of drawing spells, it's really bad for my game plan. So I started doing that, and then adding even like Sauron's Ransom, getting the ring temp twice, putting it on Anello is actually really good. As a cheeky way of like getting card advantage, because no one's gonna block a 1/4 death touch normally. And it really only does 1 damage, so it's not like you're gonna die from that commander damage anytime soon. I haven't got the chance to pull it off where I get the ring 4 times. That would be really cool too. But there's so many spells you can put in this deck and take out, so I'm still tinkering with this list per se, because I don't play it enough to really understand all the nuances in it. I just was like, hey, I have all these extra turn cards sitting in my binder, I might as well do something with them. But bring this out every so often when people are being jerks at the pod, and just be like, aha, I can play Magic too, you know what I mean? But yeah,
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, please.
About card selection.
Sure.
Mystical Dispute.
Mm-hmm.
Why Mystical Dispute, and instead of, I like Memory Lab as being a 2-mana unconditional counterspell to buy you a turn, versus Mystical, where'd it go? Mystical Dispute, which is a 3-mana conditional removal counterspell.
I usually pitch it, to be honest. I normally don't even cast it, because I don't want to think about like what I want to get back later. Sometimes, like if I'm playing these cantrips, I think Memory Lapse is better though. I think you're right. I think I should relook at the counter spells that are in the deck. I do like that it only costs 1 if I'm playing against blue players. A lot of the pods I played against with this deck were blue, so it was a little bit easier to play gotcha with them. And I don't want them to get access to the spell again, I guess. But yeah, even Complicate might be better, which is the cycle, pay 1, or you know what I mean, or pay 3 or whatever. That's a consideration that I still need to figure out.
And like Deliberate should probably be a consider, I imagine.
Yeah, probably. Again, this hasn't been updated in a while. It is the current in paper list too. There's definitely better spells out there that I need to put in there. But overall, you get the idea. Yeah,
I for sure get the idea, and I love like sort of like the simplicity. Like, as much as it's not simple, like the simplicity of just going for, like, if you get your demonic tutor, you can go for the Chain of Smog win, like stat
really quickly. Liliana Dreadhorde General is a sleeper card in this deck, because most people play that as like a token producer. But if you play it as a casualty sacrifice producer, not only do you get to draw a card on the stack, but you also get to copy 2 spells, which is nice.
Right, yeah.
It's a cheeky planeswalker most people probably won't consider in a storm list because they don't really like need it.
Yeah.
And if you alter too, that's kind of like an alternate win condition, really. Making people sacrifice everything. So it's a cheeky way to do it. Again, Bloodghast has been surprisingly very good too. I love Bloodghast as a card, but even that, I'm sure people also play Skullclamp in this sort of list too, potentially. That would be a really interesting include for like a Instant Sorcery Matters deck, because you could totally chain a bunch of cards that way, like draw a ton of cards by sacrificing your tokens. I need to add some cards for sure. Saruman, the White Hand, is the one that I have. I have that precon unopened still, so that needs to go in. But yeah, I think what we're trying to say, audience, really is these decks are really flexible too, in regards to what you can play, and understanding the nuances of your commander is really important for any strategy. Because we're very like commander centric with these lists. A lot of other archetypes are like the commander just adds to the sort of the cake you're baking. Where this is like very focused on what they do, rather than what the other cards in our deck do. It's almost centered around that particular card. I don't need Anello on the field to win the game. I'm not sure if Bruce needs Alaundo every single time to win the game, but it might be more consistent in that sense. But just a consideration.
I'd have to win. I'd have to win a game first. But anyway,
sheesh.
I feel bad. Although I mean, I have won games before. It's happened. I have the receipts. But yeah, no. So Alaundo would have to get a win in order for me to tell you if I can win without him or not. My inclination is probably not, because the deck is so hinged around the mechanic. My hope in the future is that this deck gets some additional love. I actually really enjoyed the trips to Adventures of the Forgotten Realms, and I think there's more to mine there. And I would love to see the time counters come back in a way that makes sense and not suspend. I know with like Doctor Who, we got into suspend again. I don't really want suspend. I want these time counters that Alaundo fools around with. Because I think that would be something that is going to yield some interesting space to design.
I think, again, like, I'm really glad they brought Explore back. I'm sure we're going to talk about Caverns eventually, at least with all the exciting cards coming out with that set. I think any sort of mechanic that allows you to like kind of do some neat things that you normally can't do, like Living End is really cool. Because it's like a delayed sort of time bomb, you're just waiting. You're like, oh god, what's gonna happen? And like, I don't know. Yeah, I agree with you. They didn't do enough with that set. Personally, I love that set. I thought it was great. But people hated it. So,
I think that's what two of the issues we run into here, audience. Is that these two commanders, Strixhaven was largely panned by the community. They didn't really dig it.
Right.
The reason people bought it primarily is because the triomes were in it, and the rest of the cards kind of got put by the wayside. If you think about it,
you mean New Capenna? You meant New Capenna, right?
New Capenna.
Strixhaven. Yeah, you're good. You're good. I just figured. Yeah.
But yeah, so New Capenna kind of got panned because no one's really running around with Lord Xander. There's just, these cards are not really like Rafine is really the only one that's sort of jumped off the table as being a particularly impactful card. The other sort of headlining cards from the set, like Titan of Industry, is a ramp target. Great. That's just a big old green fatty. They could have put in any set. They really could have put it anywhere.
For sure.
It fits here, sort of, I guess. But the ones that are flavorful to New Capenna kind of weren't as compelling as they probably should be.
Right.
And I would love for us to go back to New Capenna now that the Phyrexian menace has been set aside, and what has happened to the plane. Because I do think there's a lot to explore there yet still, and we could get some really cool pieces to go in an Hello deck, or in the brokers, or in the Riveteers. Like Riveteers, like all these, like, I mean, I built a Zayatora deck, and you're like, okay, it plays cool. Beamtown Bullies is another one that got a lot of hype, and it's kind of just mean.
Nobody liked it once they started to see it play, because it was so horrible to use Leveler and just level people's libraries for nothing.
Yeah, like it's mean. It's a mean approach, and like Zayatora didn't really take off, and so on and so forth. Whereas like
Falco Spara as well.
Yeah,
as a consideration.
Falco's a cool card. Like, I really like cool Falco. Card. Yeah, I think it's a really neat way to draw, like a neat way to get extra value out of your tokens or counters. I mean, but anyway, that aside, New Capenna and AFR are two that these mechanics should be probably explored and flushed out a little bit more, and then that's going to give these decks a little more teeth. because right now they're both kind of a little fragile. Where if you can derail what we're doing with our commander, like sure, don't get me wrong, Alrund's Epiphany is a good card. Pete's never going to tell you it's not. But if you can get 2 Alrund's Epiphanies because of hello, that's a fun thing.
Yeah. Even
But
again, one of the most crazy things that I've done is copy like Limdol's Vault, for example.
ooh, that's fun.
I mean, I leveraged my life total, and it was very like risky. But I
Yeah.
copied it twice. It wasn't the best decision, but it was something to try because of the way that
Well,
the card works. You know.
yeah, it's super. I think it's a super interesting way of doing it. So, a neat thing to try and do, and I think that's what these cards allow us to explore. They do require brain power, folks. I'm not gonna lie, like we cannot sit here and tell you that they don't. They take brain power, focus, practice, so you don't waste your opponent's turns and time. I sort of say this, Pete. Like if I'm playing a pod of commander, I sort of figure if we're playing and there's no infinite combos, everyone's allotted 30 minutes of playtime, and games should be done in 2 hours tops. Once it gets beyond 2 hours, this is a fiasco and someone needs to end this. But if I get if I get 30 minutes of play, me taking my turns, I'm very satisfied with my game time.
Sure.
If you're the guy taking 45 minutes, 50 minutes, 55 minutes because you're trying to play and you're playing through a very complicated line, well, you should have practiced your line before you got there so you could do it more expediently. And that sounds really mean, I know, but
Right.
you need to be respectful of your opponent's time because they have the same sort of goal in mind. They want to get another game in. And while they're prepared to accept a 4 30-minute turns for 2 hours, they're not prepared to accept 4 45-minute turns for 3 hours. Like that's just not a thing. So
I saw this on Play to Win recently. It was like a quick little thing on YouTube, and they're talking about stacks decks, right, and CDH, which is kind of different, but it's similar to our approach of these sorts of styles. It's like it's on us to. They were saying it's on the stacks player. It's on the for us in our case, the Storm player, to not take 25, 30 minutes when like they have time limits there, but we don't.
Yeah.
But it's on us to like realize what we're trying to do to potentially win. I've noticed that with some of my decks that's been happening recently, where it's like I'm like, oh, like I'm thinking really hard and it's like 10 minutes worth of a turn. I just want to ship this right now. I don't want to do this right now. But like old Rutstein with the ETB triggers and stuff. That's another similar sort of situation. But
yeah,
the more complicated lines are, the more you should really know what you're doing, and how your deck interacts, for the sake of your pod, basically.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. All right. Is there anything else we want to add in here, or we've pretty much covered the gist of it?
I guess with these sorts of styles, know what your colors do with each other. Like red and blue do something different than black and blue. Usually, red and black, and like the red copies things, blue counters things, black has removal. But then there's other weird cards that do like Sauron's Ransom is like your opponent does a factor fiction for you.
Right.
So like understanding how that happens when you copy it twice and you give 2 opponents the choice. Does it go in turn order or do you pick the opponent? It's in turn order. You know what I mean? Some simple stuff like that. Or Alaundo, I mean, trying to think of a good example because I don't really play the deck or don't really know the deck well. Maybe it's when to untap him versus when not to, when to target him versus not to target him. What cards to discard to him or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, that definitely takes practice and trying to like get the most value out of what you do put in exile, because you can't necessarily control as easily what you put in exile. When things come out of exile, and so you need to be mindful of what you put into exile, how many more tapping cycles of Alaundo that's going to represent, and how are you going to get there. So anyway, it takes some brain power and some thought in order to make it work. And keeping track, you need to have lots of dice to help keep track of how many time counters on stuff.
Right. For mine, it's like make sure you know that if you're taking an extra turn or two, you should win the game as quickly as possible.
Agreed.
Like, you shouldn't take 3 or 4 extra turns with your expropriate and then do nothing. Like, you draw a
Oh
card and you
goodness.
pass to yourself.
No.
I've definitely been
Oh
guilty of
no.
that once, and I was like, I can't. I have to either take this deck apart or find a way to go faster.
Yeah.
Once I have those extra turn spells in hand. So
Yeah.
again, it's all about your pod and what you are comfortable seeing. So yeah, I think we beat this up a little bit,
Yeah,
in
I think we
regards
did
to
too. So,
to
all
Dirtle.
right, let's wrap up the Dirtle Fest and bring it to a close. Folks, if you want to reach out to us and let us know about your Dirtle deck or something we missed about how Dirtle decks and playing decks that spin their wheels a lot go, or you want to show us your list, by all means, reach out to us on social media. The email, the Twitter, the Instagram, the threads are all there for you to check out and reach out to us because we'd love to have you guys contribute and share your experience with us. I think that's it. Oh, don't forget, folks, if you would like to find the podcast, Google Play is soon going to be discontinuing their podcast app. So if you like to listen to us and you listen to us on Google Podcasts, then you need to go look for us on Spotify or Amazon Music or somewhere else, or just follow us on the Discord with the lotuscouncil.com because it's always there and available. So just be aware, check up on your local, on whatever your favorite podcast app is, and make sure that we're still there. All right, everybody, thanks very much. Oh, go ahead.
Real quick preview next week. So we're going higher up in the complexity. So like Storm/Dirtling is good, but now we're going into like full on control, right? Where every decision is like, how do I mess with my opponents? How do I further my game plan without being interacted with? Stuff like that. So this is our like final sort of discussion of like the deck levels of complexity. Thank you so much again for your time, Bruce. We'll see how we feel next week. Hopefully we survive another week and we don't have to take 2 weeks off again.
Yeah. I think given the climate of the world right now, I think everybody stay safe.
Yeah, please
keep healthy out there.
Yeah.
I know there's people. As the cold weather approaches, the cold and flu season, and COVID season kicks up. So everybody, take care of yourself out there and stay safe and healthy. We'll talk to you again next week, everybody. So have fun playing Magic and wherever you get to do it next. So, yeah.
Cheers, everybody. Take that extra turn and take care of yourself. Thank you.